I had Sonic on the Master System.
I quite like the Master System version.
I think it's better. I think at the
controversial.
Time, gameplay-wise, it is a better game.
The comment section is about to be very, very angry.
It's on fire already.
The entire point of Sonic is it goes fast. Hey, I'm Trista Bites with Antstream Gaming Talk, and today I have with me the self-appointed overlord of OLL Gaming.
Hello.
It's Jon.
Hello.
Hello. Overlord is an interesting title.
It's the official title. If you do look us up, yes.
That's good to know. It fills me with minor fear. I'm not going to lie.
We're not that scary.
Not that scary.
We try to. No, we're a welcoming and inclusive community. Honestly, that's what we are.
I like that. Welcoming, inclusive, slightly scary, has an overlord, and has an excellent Sonic t-shirt.
Thank you very much. He's drowning.
Yes.
Oh no, it's not drowning, is it? That's when he gets hit. That's when he gets hits with rings, isn't it?
I mean, he could get hit and also drown. He could multitask Sonic.
I think that's the more landing on spikes sprite. I'm not sure. I should have looked this up.
Well, I also probably shouldn't have quizzed you about your t-shirt as the first thing to ask you, but it just fills me with memories, because that's mostly how Sonic looked when I started playing the games.
Sonic has suffered for a long time in recent years, so it's a homage to his glory days, really. That's the way I like to think of it.
Pretty much, pretty much. So obviously, I know you mostly from running OLL games and things, but I want to sort of reel all the way back to the start and find out where your gaming journey began.
Oh, it's a long, long time ago. Now, it would have been mid-80s, and I first discovered games through the handheld LCD games.
Okay. The classic Tigers and...
Yes, exactly that. My first one was the... Do you remember the Tomy ones that you had to hold up to your eyes?
Oh, yeah.
I had the white one. I think they made like a red one and a couple of others.
I remember
had
the
white
red
one. It was called Thundering Turbo, and it was a driving game. It wasn't great, but I absolutely loved it. But you had to be in good light, because light came in through the top to light up the images on that. And all it did was just very simple bleeps and bloops and stuff like that, and I absolutely loved that. It was really sort of early 90s when Sonic came out on the Mega Drive, and I wasn't really too into consoles at the time. I had a couple of friends who were twins, and because they were twins, they got extra large Christmas presents, and they got a Mega Drive for Christmas with Sonic 1, and it just blew me away. And it's like, I have to own this thing. I need to get in on this. So I couldn't afford it at the time, being like 10 years old. And my mum wasn't a huge fan of video games because they rot your brains and stuff. She saw that Panorama documentary on BBC once.
It's true, we're all currently zombies. That's what it is.
So the closest I could get was the Tiger Sonic LCD. Which I think they actually re-released quite recently as well.
I have one of those.
And I've still got it, and I played it to death. And eventually I was able to save up and got myself a Master System, and I had Sonic on the Master System. It wasn't quite as good as the Mega Drive one, because there was no loop-the-loop in the Master System version, not until Sonic 2.
It's Sonic, but kind of slightly more chilled out. I quite like the Master System version. It's a different game, but it has quite a nice vibe to it.
I think it's better. I think at the
controversial.
At the time, it was like Mega Drive, obviously that's the way to go. That's the one I wanted, and I was slightly disappointed that I had to live with the Master System version. But looking back on it, I think gameplay-wise, it is a better game.
I think the comment section is about to be very, very angry.
It's on fire already.
The entire point of Sonic is it goes fast. On the Master System, it just kind of goes...
It goes quite slow, and the screen can't keep up. And it can't render enough of the level, so on Jungle, if you fall down, you die, because it won't scroll back through the level because it can't cache enough information. Yeah. Interesting fact, while I think about it, at one point I was 15th in the world for speedrunning Sonic on the Master System. It has been superseded, though, sadly. But
you had that, though, at one point.
I used to be good. Well, I say at one point, it was like 3 years ago. I went back to it. But I do love Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah. I can't deny it. So yeah, started on Master System. And then progressed to Mega Drive. I'm a big fan of driving games, so I had the Formula 1 game. I had Super Monaco GP, one of my favourite driving games, and then they had the official Formula 1 game. And there was this time at school, I don't know if you had this, but like normally on the last day of term, you're allowed to take things into school for like an open afternoon. And I took my Mega Drive into school with me with my new Formula 1 game that I was so proud of, that I loved so much. But one of my friends brought in their Super Nintendo with Super Mario Kart. And we had a Mega Drive and a SNES set up in our school sports hall for people to come and play on. And everyone wanted to play Mario Kart on the SNES, everybody. And here's me with my Mega Drive that I loved so much with my Formula 1 game, and nobody wanted to play on it.
Aww.
So I then realised on that day, it would have been, 1992, I think, I'd had the Mega Drive a couple of years. I then decided, right, I need to now change my allegiance in the console war, because it was always Sega for me. It was always Sega from the beginning.
So you were like, this is not making me popular enough.
Basically,
I need to
yes.
switch sides and abandon
Exactly.
the Sega
That's exactly
posse.
what I did. And I didn't have another Sega console until the Dreamcast. But that's jumping ahead. So I actually had, my next door neighbour was actually selling his Super Nintendo. Mm-hmm. So a couple of days after this tragic school incident, I was actually able to swap my Mega Drive for the Super Nintendo.
So you literally
swapped it.
This wasn't just an as well. You actually abandoned your Sega roots.
Yep, PGA Golf and everything that I had with it, it all went. James Pond I had with the Mega Drive, that went, but that was rubbish. Didn't mind missing that. And then I had the Super Nintendo, and it came with the Super Scope 6 as well, the big old bazooka.
Ah, that thing was cool.
And I had Super Mario World as well. So I kind of had a immediate introduction into Mario. I never really played the NES stuff or the 8-bit Marios until I got All Stars on the SNES, and then got to get used to it that way. And then after SNES, it went on to obviously 32-bit, and we had the war brewing in 1994. And being into my driving games and being away from Sega for a while, I was thinking, you know what, it's maybe time to get a Sega console for, once we get into this CD era. I'd played things like Virtua Racing and Daytona and in the arcades. And Daytona was going to be a launch game on the Saturn, and it's like, right, I'm going to get a Saturn because that looks amazing. And it had the steering wheel with it and everything. And then when they then announced that the price of the Saturn was going to be £400, and PlayStation came out at E3 and literally did their whole $299 thing, it's like, right, okay, I'm going to have a PS1. I'm going to get Ridge Racer because that looks so much better than the terrible bodge job that Daytona was at the time. I went with PS1. And then the PS1 became what I think I still consider my favourite console. Final Fantasy VII, of course, it is my favourite game of all time.
It's Stone Cold classic, isn't it?
I don't want to risk saying that it's the best game of all time because we're on the internet, but it's my favourite. And of course, we had things like Tomb Raider. The first iterations of so many franchises came on PS1. And granted, they were on Saturn and PC as well, but Resident Evil, those kind of titles, absolutely loved those. And then the following generation was when I really started getting into collecting. So had the PS2 on day one, massively disappointed with the launch games on the PS2, Ridge Race and Tekken Tag Tournament, I believe it was.
You're dissing Tekken Tag again. I just feel like you're trying to anger everyone on the internet.
Don't get me wrong. They were good games, but they didn't feel like the generational leap that we had before, going 16-bit to 32-bit. I don't think we've had that since, really. That wow
8
factor.
to 16 and 16 to 32
exactly. It's been very much
massive
incremental
changes.
Since then, smaller and smaller each time. So PS2 was great, and then we had obviously Xbox and GameCube. And at that point, I was really into my games. So I actually imported an American Xbox and an American GameCube when they first came out because we got them in the UK, I think, 3 or 4 months later. So I imported mine from America. So I had American versions of that generation. And the Xbox graphics were a little bit cleaner, a bit more high def as well. Than what the PS2 could offer, so I was mainly an Xbox boy through that generation, and then of course it all went through the same thing that everyone did, I think, really, where we all went 360, PS4, and now it's kind of 50-50 for PS5 and Series X. That's a quick history.
Yeah, so it sounds like you skipped basically all of the home computer things. So any
had
Speccy or C64, Amiga, Atari, or even PC gaming?
So while I've very much been console focused throughout my entire gaming career, if a career is the thing to call it, I don't know.
I mean, you were in the top 15 in the world. I mean,
true. I haven't made really any money from it until obviously until I started OLL. But I had my best friend Dave at the time. He was very much into the computer side of things. So he had a Spectrum. He went into PC. That's where I first saw things like Doom, SimCity, stuff like that. So while I didn't own them myself, I would always go around friends at weekends, and so I'd have that kind of fix of PC gaming, and it was just too complicated for me because you had C prompts and you had to go into basic and make things start and all that kind of stuff, and I just like plugging it in and turning it on. I think it might have been because at the time, because my mum was quite strict when it came to games, I was limited to 1 hour of gaming per day. I wasn't allowed more than that. So it had to be quick.
That's pretty strict.
So it had to be consoles because I wouldn't have the time.
You didn't have time
PCs.
to be. You couldn't be there with the magazines typing out all of the basic code
exactly that.
into
I haven't
a
got time to
C64
load up
or
a
something.
Spectrum game and hear it scream at me for 5 minutes.
It can take most of an hour to load some games up if they've got multiple things.
If it works at all. So I did have exposure to it, but I never really owned it myself until I really got into sort of collecting in recent years.
Yeah. So now you've gone back and started collecting and filling in those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any games that you now have that you wish you'd had more time to play when you were younger?
I missed the whole real Amiga stuff. A couple of standouts for me: Lotus Turbo Challenge on the Amiga, way better than the Mega Drive version. Things like Cannon Fodder and those Amiga classics, Sensible Soccer, which they did eventually get ported to other consoles, but they were never quite as good. So I would have liked to have had the time and the knowledge on how to operate all of these things all that time ago.
I think there was a lot of games that I played on the Mega Drive that had been on something else first, and I didn't know. Because one of the first games I got for the Mega Drive was Megalomania, and I didn't know that was a port. Because I was so Sega focused that I had
really badly done like digitized voices as well in Megalomania. Where on the Amiga it said, on the Amiga when you progress from I don't know medieval to whatever it was, it goes, you've advanced a technological level. But then on the Mega Drive it goes.
I just liked Scarlet. It would just be like, do you want to be on my team? No. it was just. I like a lot of sarcastic characters. Actually, it's probably why I like Cybermorph or the Jaguar, and why I like Tomb Raider. To be honest, just these sarcastic female characters for some reason just appealed.
Big Tomb Raider fan, actually. Love Tomb Raider. I skived off school only twice in my life, and one of those was to play Desert Strike, and the other one was to play the first Tomb Raider. I absolutely love that game. So I have a real affinity for games where you have to climb around on things and climb up stuff. So things like, in recent times, Uncharted, Prince of Persia's, the earlier Ninja Gaiden games, Ico, things like that. Oh, Ico, 10 out of 10, brilliant.
Yeah, that always seemed to just get passed by a lot of people.
I mean, it's quite basic, to be fair. You don't really do a lot except for climb around and hit some black things from time to time.
Like it's got a good vibe to it. It's got a good atmosphere to it, and I think
it's also just the level design as well. When you look at like the Gothic architecture that you get in a lot of games like Dark Souls and stuff like that. Big castles in games. Games are really good at doing castles, I think.
Castles are just good. Why would you not? Why would you make a game and not have a castle in it?
Mario's got a castle.
Yeah.
Alex Kidd's got a castle.
Yeah.
Are we now going to list as many games as we can think of that have got castles? I think most games have probably got a castle in them somewhere.
They've got a castle in them somewhere. Like, otherwise, what are you doing?
Well, there's always a kingdom to save, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, what's the point in saving the kingdom if it doesn't have a cool castle?
Yeah, where are you going to live once you've saved it?
Yeah, exactly. You go save, the princess is in another castle. Cool, I'll keep this castle then, I'm very short games if I were writing them, I think. So obviously your love of gaming has been with you for most of your life. Mm-hmm. Did you always know you wanted to do something sort of business-wise with that? Not until more recently. So
aside from video games, I've had to have a job to live and everything. So like many people, I started off in retail when I was 16, and I worked through supermarkets. I climbed the greasy pole to a management level working at a supermarket.
I was wondering where that was going, but okay, cool. It was a metaphorical pole.
Yep. And then I progressed from a supermarket. I then became a store manager for Game, who at the time were the biggest video game retailer in the UK.
Yeah,
So
I feel like almost everyone who works in gaming either worked for Game at one point or worked for Computer Exchange at one point.
Yes, or Game Station.
Or Game
Which I suppose
Station,
that's kind of, that became Game.
Yeah.
And that was the start of, Game changing a little bit. So I was a store manager at Game, and it's quite local to where we are here in Norwich, and I worked around East Anglia in various stores. And when it got to 2013, which was the year when PS4 and Xbox One were released, we also had The Last of Us, and we had Grand Theft Auto 5. So that was kind of the biggest year that had ever been seen, really, outside of perhaps the launch of the Wii. But it was the biggest year, really, for games retail. And I felt at the end of that year that it's like, I think I've seen everything I'm going to see now in games retail. I don't think it's really going to get much more interesting and exciting than two of the biggest, best games ever made, and then a console launch as well, where the two consoles, they released only a week apart. So I started to think, you can see this digital revolution is coming, physical games retail, it's only going to go one way. So I started to look around at what perhaps I could do for myself, but still retaining that games element of what I did for work, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It's way better than stacking beans on shelves, I tell you.
Stacking games on shelves are way more fun.
It was really a case of starting to plan it then, which is crazy that it's like 9 years ago now that I first started thinking about what it would become. And so it was really taking, what do I know, what can I do, what's my skill set, and I could do retail and I could do customer service, and I knew that I liked video games. So I was thinking, what kind of business would work that isn't just a game shop, so to speak, because I could see that wasn't necessarily going to last in the future. And so putting it all together, I ended up thinking, well, why don't I have some sort of a community space where people can pay to come and meet other gamers. We could do tournaments, events, all that kind of stuff. And OLL just kind of morphed out of that, really, taking my interests and my skills and mashing it together. It then took another couple of years of actually planning it out to say, is this actually a viable thing? Because you've got to get a bank loan for these things.
Jump to having something venue based.
And it became obvious pretty quick that there's a lot more to running a cafe or a bar than just buying some drinks and you sell them to people. You have to have licenses for these things, and you have to be properly trained in the correct way of preparing foods and drinks, and you've got premises licenses and all the legal stuff that you have to think of as well. So
place must not fall on customers.
Yeah,
customers
that sort of
must
stuff.
not be poisoned by food and drinks, even if they are in very, very cool scientific looking beakers. And all the health and safety for the electronics and all those extra things you have to learn.
Exactly, all of those things. So then I thought, obviously I was still working at Game while I was coming up with this business plan, and it was like, right, I need to fill in some gaps in my knowledge here. So I decided to leave Game, and I took a job as a manager at a cinema here in Norwich, because the cinema would give me the experience of managing more of an entertainment style venue.
Yeah, and they've got
but
food,
also
and
food
drink,
and drink,
herding people around.
Exactly that, and licenses, scheduling, timetables, that kind of thing. So I filled in all my knowledge gaps by being a cinema manager for 2 years, while at the same time finalising the business plan, sorting out the monies required to get it all started and search for a suitable premises. And then in 2016, I finally found the premises that we are in today. And then it was then the crunch time came. It's like, are you really now going to give up your career so far on, a reasonable salary that was allowing me to live relatively comfortably to now go on my own? And I thought, well, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it.
Yeah, you'll spend your whole life thinking, what if I had done it?
Yeah. So I found a premises, we took the leap, and we did it. And 5 years later, it's still going.
Yeah, and it's getting better and better. You're doing upgrades, you're adding
Indeed.
more features, adding more community events.
So OLL Games, it's been going for, we're now in our 6th year here at our venue here. And we've improved the venue a lot. We've done things like new floor, new decorations. The games library that we have constantly grows and evolves. Obviously, next-gen consoles coming into the mix, that kind of thing, which allows us to do new events, new tournaments, that kind of stuff. And then over the years, we've made good contacts with a lot of the local content creators around Norwich, as Norwich is quite a hub for retro gamers and content creators.
Norwich is just like the place to be, especially for retro creators. It's just a kind of mecca for people to sort of be like, sit inside and make lots of retro gaming content.
Exactly.
It is the place to be in the UK for that.
And our location to where a lot of these content creators are based means that they came in for a cup of tea here and there. And so we got to know these content creators. And so that's helped us to build a network for what we've done now to start our online offering. So while it's still in early stages, we now do live streams when we do our tournaments. We've learned so much from guys. We now do off-site events as well. And yeah, it's all growing in the right direction. But at the heart of it all is just, passion for games.
So as well as doing this venue and sorting this out, you also thought, you're learning all these skills, planning your entire life, getting all of these things on board, and you thought, you know what I want to do as well? I also want to write a book.
Yeah, basically.
Overachiever right here.
During the 2 years while I was working in a cinema, I would often do late shifts where I would have to work until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I would get home and I would just be buzzing from work and I wouldn't be able to go to sleep. So I would be staying up till 5 or 6 in the morning.
Right.
So I just needed something to fill that time between 2 or 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the mornings. So I just had this random idea that I thought, why don't I write a book about every video game I've ever played? And so that's what I did. It took about a year to write. I had to, I went on Wikipedia and I found lists of every single game ever released for every console, and I ticked off every game that I'd played.
Wow.
And effectively just wrote a couple of paragraphs for each game as a short review, scored everything out of 10, and put it all into a timeline of when I played each game, because obviously I didn't do, say, Saturn or N64 until I got in, and when they first came out, I went back to those in my 20s when I started collecting. So it had the unexpected side effect of kind of becoming like a life story book. And so I got to sort of reminisce about a lot of the people that I knew at the time through the games that I've played. And I think a lot of people have that with things like music and films. It reminds you of a certain place and time.
Yeah, they take you back, and games have all of those elements to them. And you often play games with friends or discover games because of friends. So yeah, I can see how that would work. And the people that you
knew as well. And there's people that I haven't seen for 20 years, and it's like, oh, I remember that day in school, and Mason recommended me Final Fantasy 3, and I was like, oh, what's this Final Fantasy thing all about? And it was Final Fantasy 3, and it was like, oh my god, this is literally the best game I've ever played, which is what prompted me to get 7 when it first came out as well. And it was surprising how much influence games had on decisions that I made, and friends that I had, and things that I did, and places that you go to, and things like that. So it was quite revealing in a lot of aspects. But yeah, it was also quite satisfying to complete a project as well. Yeah. As I've never written a book before, I'm not an author.
I like that you're like, I rather than sleep between 2 and 6 a.m., I'm just going to write an entire game autobiography in those spare hours, having never written a book before. What's this book called as well?
Rather unsurprisingly, it's called One Life Left, an autobiography of games, and it's available on Amazon Kindle apps and devices.
I like that consistent brand. You have thought everything through. Well, so many people I talk to are like, oh, well, I just sort of fell into this. And you're just like, no, I planned my entire career around this eventual goal.
Retroactively, it looks like I've planned it, but in all honesty, I think I did make a lot of it up as I went along. I have been quite fortunate in some ways.
Just go with it.
All right, we'll do that. We'll do
that. Was a bust. You called an overlord. We announced that at the beginning.
True.
So a master plan, overlord. That all works quite neatly.
Yeah, but the venue and what we do now, the name of it comes from the name of the book. So that's why we're called what we are.
It all came together as a cohesive whole. I like
one thing in the book, I don't want to spoil it because I want people to buy it one day.
Yeah, no
but
spoilers.
At the end of the book, I went through and I spent a week compiling all the stats of the game reviews as well. So obviously I scored every game out of 10. So I've got average reviews per year, per console. Most purchased franchises, most played franchises and stuff like that. And it turns out I've played more Tetris games than anything else.
So did you spend much time in arcades and things growing up?
Of course, they were the hallowed ground for the early 90s because, of course, everything was so much better in the arcades than what you could have at home. Until we got to sort of Soul Calibur on the Dreamcast, I think, was probably the tipping point.
That was pretty
I would
arcade
say.
perfect, yeah.
Whereas the first game actually had more because it had the single-player adventure mode and stuff. But yeah, for me, absolutely loved all of the classic stuff. Things like Space Invaders and Defender and those kind of titles. Had a huge
Pac-Man.
affinity for those. But it was also because a lot of those games, they were old arcade games from my perspective. Because I didn't get into it until early 90s, and so I didn't see the Space Invaders and things like that, and so that was the place where I saw those types of games as well.
So was there an arcade machine that was particularly your favourite for a while?
I love the shoot 'em up games, so Defender as well. It was also one of the earlier games that I saw on a friend's Atari as well.
Okay, yeah. So you got to then see it in its original form.
Yeah, huge fan of Defender. It was the sound effects as well, as they had only the 8-bit generation could do that really good crispy explosion sound.
Yeah, just there was something so visceral about it, absolutely. Yeah. So being as you mentioned it earlier, I think I should challenge you to a game of Defender. We've got lots of challenges on Antstream, and I think we should test how well you can actually remember this. Since, you went back to Master System Sonic and became one of the best in the world, we need to see if you've still got the skills.
I'm up for that.
You're up for that?
I can't guarantee any skill level here, but I'm...
Good, that gives me a chance. I like it.
Well up for trying.
So I am going to go for... Should we go for a mutant massacre?
Yes.
It's 1 life, maximum of 3 minutes, okay? Do you want to go first or do you want to go second?
I will go second.
Everyone says that. I don't even know why I bother asking this anymore, to be honest. Okay, let's see how well we do. Mutants all over the shop.
Are you aiming for them or avoiding them?
I'm theoretically aiming for them. I like the fact you need to ask that.
Oh no!
Oh no! I got 2 of them.
2 mutants.
Well, I'm just going easy on
seconds.
you. I'm just going on easy because you're the guest. You see, just
Okay.
to not be rude. That's what that is, plausibly.
To be fair, it's about the same skill level as myself, so
We'll find out.
Is it D-pad or analog stick?
You can use either.
Oh.
See, maybe that was the problem. I used the D-pad.
Oh, I'll use D-pad as well. Oh no! Oh, you've got to be joking me! It went too fast! Well, that's embarrassing.
So, anyway, as I was saying, complete pro, absolute pro. I didn't want to go too easy on you because, it's got to be a fair challenge.
Try to position myself as an expert and look what happens.
I think this is the first time I've ever won one of these, so I'm quite happy.
Oh, I'm so disappointed in myself.
So after that wildly disappointing defeat at my clearly expert hands at Defender, I wanted to ask you, assuming that we're still talking, where can people find OLL Gaming? Where can people find you online?
Well, we are on all of the major social media platforms, so if you were to just type in OLL Games on your social media or video platform of choice, I'm sure you'll come across us.
Yes, and also check out the book as well to learn more about your life story. Additional chapters currently being written about how I need to be murdered. with Defender game sort of next to it as the reference, I'm
I'm going
assuming.
to give you a whole chapter in the second iteration.
Excellent. I am honoured and also terrified. So thank you again, the overlord of OLL games,
Thank
for
you.
talking to me. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.